Respected chair, co-chair, dignitaries, particularly sitting on the first row, second row, my young friends, rapporteurs. Chairman said thanks a lot for accommodating my intervention in this session because in the afternoon I have some other engagement. I have submitted my paper and presentation to the organizers. I request you to kindly have a look into that. And if there is any feedback, kindly either telephonically inform me or send an email to me. We'll go on improving it. The topic was how to proceed with innovations and reforms and extension. And speak after Dr. Das, Dr. Chetty, Dr. Veerbhadra and others. Hardly there's anything left for me to introduce afresh. But maybe at the cost of repetition, I would like to re-emphasize on the following points. And time being a limiting factor, I have about 15 points, either in the form of submission or in the form of repetition. In the beginning itself, I'll mention that extension is a very challenging and complex subject. And having been around this subject matter for the last almost 5 decades, I can very confidently say that you may have money, you may have programs, but if you do not have well-defined, properly structured technology delivery lines, perhaps back to square number one. Number two, I can also submit that it's a huge and challenging task because 700 districts, 7,000 blocks, 7 lakh villages, nearly 1.5 to 2.5 public sector, private sector extension agencies, and nearly 14 crore farmers. And 80% of them would be small and marginal. Let me come straight to the point. What are the innovations which are looking for? Number one, empowerment of farmers and promoting farmer business schools. Yesterday evening we were talking with, I was talking with Dr. Das, Dr. A.K. Singh Sahab, Honorable Vice-chancellor, and one thing is becoming very prominent and very clear that farmer organization, farmer producer companies, farmer aggregates, farmer cooperatives, or whatever you may call it as, may be one of the answer. But unless you have a very strong mechanism to promote business plans, perhaps we may not be able to reach the desired end. Meaning thereby that promote aggregates, but at the same time, inculcate agri-business, planning in those, formations, number one. Number two, strengthening frontline extension and strengthening, field extension. If I see the audience, nearly 80% or 90% of them will be, from the frontline extension side. But equally important is the field extension side. What has been demonstrated by the front line will have to be carried forward to the nook and corner of the block or a district. And that has to be done primarily by the field extension fellows. You have village extension workers, agriculture supervisors, Hobli supervisors, assistant directors, deputy directors, joint directors, so on and so forth. Because the front line has the limitation of exhibiting the best, But carry forward to the nook and corner of a district or a block will always remain with the field extension. Both are supplementary and complementary. We may have to understand that from the core of our heart that frontline will exhibit, and what has been exhibited, has to be carried forward by public-private partnership or by public and private extension service providers. See, when I started working with TNV program, followed by Atma program, followed by KVK, Minister of Agriculture, Planning Commission, second submission is wherever you have strong M&D, monitoring and evaluation, the results are achieved in a better way. And I have seen that in NAP1, NAP2, NAP3, NARP, Dr. Chetty is aware about that. Wherever we had strong monitoring and evaluation component, the results were moving very positively. And therefore, the straightway submission is, can we think of having a very strong M&D cell in the Samitis or in the Ataris, so that we can get wonderful feedback and we can start acting upon the feedback. Third thing is, good or bad, you have a structured extension formation in crop side. But when it comes to horticulture, animal husbandry, dairy, fishery, poultry, extension services are either very weak or missing. And therefore, we all may have to put our thoughts together and see how best these delivery for these important sectors could be augmented. Options are many. Use the innovative farmers, use farmer groups, use commercial dairy farms, use the commercial horticulture farms, and that can be extension change agent in between the farmers and development departments and frontline extension side. The next point is operational convergence. This I have been repeating from my planning commission days, that wherever there is convergence of programs and activities, at least functional convergence, the departments may have their identity retained, district level, block level, but when you go down to the field level, at the farm level, if there is operational convergence possibilities are worked out, then perhaps impact will be much more positive and significant. The next point is, there are resource endowed areas and resource deficit areas. For example, tribal areas, hill areas, mountainous areas, rain-fed areas. Perhaps our extension approach may have to be a little aggressive, a little different than business as usual in the resource endowed areas. Everybody has mentioned about enterprise combination, entrepreneurship, startups. I have seen of late, particularly last 1 decade, a lot of IT and MBA graduates are trying to find a place in agribusinesses. Perhaps it will be a very good opportunity to capture their talent, provide them the platforms. Yesterday, Dr. Meera mentioned wonderfully well. There could be different kind of platforms driven by IT fellows, driven by MBA fellows, because they know better, maybe in the next decade, they will drive it better, linking farmers on one side, businesses on other side, and markets on other side. Perhaps we may have to promote those kind of platforms where MBA fellows, IT fellows, entrepreneurs could play a major role in driving extension delivery than depending totally on the public sector or the private sector. Public sector will have its limitation, private sector will have its limitation, but the moment you bring in business opportunities, a lot of young fellows will try to find a place in agricultural extension. The next point is, if I have to, again, Dr. Chetty, Dr. Das will agree with me that a lot depends upon, how do I collect feedback from the field, from the farmers, from the development functionaries. How do I document it? How do I analyze it? And how do I, give signals back to my management, back to my research, back to my, Vice-chancellor, back to my secretary. And if this mechanism is weak, perhaps, we take it for granted that what we do, is impacting on the field. So the submission here is, can we think of developing some mechanism to collect feedback from the farmers, document it at KVK level or Atma level, analyze it at a Samiti level or an Atalic level, and then giving feedback to the Honorable Vice-chancellor, or to the Secretary of Agriculture, or to the government, or to the council. Perhaps, if this lineup is improved, there is, I can confidently say, a wonderful chance of improving the extension delivery. The next point is, can we think of, Gangadharan sir? The next point is, can we think of promoting extension laboratories? You all will agree that for biological sciences or physical sciences, there is laboratory backup. Innovations are developed, body of knowledge is generated, and then, the science is pushed. But Savik, I have been repeating this point. Can we think of, developing extension laboratories? And the location can be managed, location can be university, location can be a strong KVK, location can be a strong Atma. But can we identify, in a given microecology, the extension, I will call it as the extension laboratories. And I discussed this issue with Dr. Chandrasekhar. Broadly there is a consensus, but the modalities will have to be thought and defined. Sir, I will take, 3 minutes more? 3 minutes more, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just, I have, Veerbhadra sir, I have experienced, when I was handling, externally aided projects, World Bank projects. NATP, NAEP, I mentioned NAP 1, 2, 3 all over the country. And if you want to push the reforms, then perhaps EAP is a better option. Dr. Chetty sir, you will agree with me. With normal funding, the schemes cannot take on reforms because you have mandated activities and you cannot go beyond that. But if there is a EAP kind of situation, if there is a EAP kind of provision, then, whether it is the World Bank or a UNDP or a FAO, they can push the reforms, and government agencies, whether it is Ministry of Finance or Agriculture Ministry or Council, they generally fall in line because, there is a tremendous pressure from, EAP kind of provisions. And normally government and, bureaucracies and, technical formations fall in line. Last point, agriculture extension, agriculture business needs a lot of social value change. Chetty sir, this point is very important because agriculture needs a total social value change aspect. Because even if I am a big farmer earning in crores, exporting my produce to Europe and America, but if I have to marry my daughter, I will prefer a white-collar kind of person, who is working at taluka level or at a district level, meaning thereby the income is not necessarily, increasing the social value of agriculture sector. And therefore, I have a proposition that all of our startups, entrepreneurs, if they move on a business line, if they establish their own office, if they will have their own brand, a four-wheeler, production, his production moves to the towns and cities, and he has a comparable economic and social equity, a social status, with, what I call it as a, white-collar job kind of person. And therefore, the moment we increase the social value of agriculture, perhaps, a lot of young fellows will join the agriculture. Otherwise, in the present format, in the primary agriculture, young fellows will not join. Because, his wife or his children, they have a different aspirations now. Growing India, everybody is looking for opportunities. And, as I mentioned, that our startups and entrepreneurs, if they establish, kind of their own, brand, market, small little office, four-wheeler, then, his social value will, increase. Friends, there are a couple of other points, but as I mentioned, they are there in my paper, in my presentation. They are available with Dr. Gangadhar, Ishwarappa. I'll be very glad if you kindly provide me the feedback. Thanks a lot, Mr. Chair and Co-Chair, for giving me this opportunity and, submit my thoughts which were not, very well organized. But, 10, 15 points I mentioned, each one of them, needs our consideration. Thanks a lot. Thank you once again.